Today we're continuing to look at basic cellular structures so we can describe how cells function. And specifically, we want to be able to describe and identify vesicles, lysosomes, cytoplasm, the nucleus, and ribosomes. So we talked last time about how the entire cell is surrounded by the cell membrane that's made up of lipids. It's a phospholipid bilayer. And those lipids are the same base chemicals that make up oils and fats. Now, the cell membrane can change its shape, and that includes being able to pinch parts of it off or join with bubbles of phospholipids inside of the cell as well. We call those pinched off sacs vesicles. And vesicles get used to store and transport materials in and out of the cell. Not all chemicals can dissolve within the cell cytoplasm, and sometimes you don't want chemicals to actually interact with the rest of the cell. So we can use vesicles to store them and cordon them off. We also have proteins in cell membranes, and that's how vesicles are able to join and latch on to the cell membrane. They can interact with other proteins that allow them to connect together. Proteins also allow chemicals to pass through the membrane, and they can even be used to interact with the environment and other cells. There is a very special type of vesicle that we call a lysosome. Now, a lysosome is one of those examples of when you want to keep the chemicals contained. A lysosome contains digestive enzymes, chemicals which will break down other chemicals, including the cell itself. So lysosomes can be used to destroy stuff that's been stored in a vesicle, to break down food contained within them, or in the case of a process called cell apoptosis, it can actually kill off the entire cell if it needs to. This is used if a cell gets infected with other microorganisms and it detects that it's in danger. Sometimes it's if the cell is getting worn out and is at risk of becoming cancerous. It will undergo programmed cell death or cell apoptosis, and that ensures that it can't in turn damage cells around it or become a threat to the body. All of the organelles within the cell are contained within a jelly-like substance that we call the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is kind of hard to represent, but is basically the fluid that all of the organelles are floating in. Mostly it's made up of water, but there's also carbohydrates, sugars, fibers, there's proteins floating around in them, so there's lots of different chemicals contained within that cytoplasm, and it acts as the interface through which different parts of the cell interact. At the very core of the cell is the nucleus. The nucleus is important because this is where the DNA is contained. So the DNA contains the instructions the cell needs in order to make proteins. And those proteins can direct the action of the cell. So the nucleus kind of acts like the command center, the brain of the entire cell. The nucleus itself has its own membrane, just like a cell membrane, that we call the nuclear envelope. And this ensures that it's difficult for things to get in and out of the nucleus unless it's been specifically allowed. Because what you don't want is you don't want viruses to be able to interact with the nucleus, although they inevitably find ways around that. Messengers from inside the nucleus will take genetic information and they'll run it through a ribosome. Now we can find ribosomes in several different places around the cell. Lots of these ribosomes are floating around in the cytoplasm, but there's also ribosomes that are embedded in a structure we call the endoplasmic reticulum. What ribosomes do is they actually translate the DNA into a protein. So the nucleus stores the DNA. It will use messenger RNA to send signals to the ribosome, and the ribosomes will use those messengers in order to make a protein. And with those proteins, the cells are able to maintain the functions of life.